What do you do when the only thing left of someone you loved is a horse they left behind? She asks the question like a small prayer. Frost cracks under her boots. The stable smells of hay and liniment. Wind slides through the rafters and carries the ache of empty rooms. It is almost midnight. The lane outside is asleep. Her shadow speaks to the moon. Grief sits in her like a pocket stone, heavy, private, worn smooth. She moves with a careful economy, a folded jacket, a cup set to cool, a hand that avoids sudden gestures. She carries a manila envelope under her arm. The photograph inside will be dangerous. She knows it. So she breathes and walks toward the stall. Before she sees him, she feels him, a warm shape that rearranges air. A single ear pricks. He smells of road dust and engine, his coat dull and marked where winter rubbed and where something sharp once caught skin. He is not a racing program picture. He is stitched together by stubbornness and human hands that were too tired to be gentle. She approaches slowly because horses read hurry. Her palm opens like an invitation. He lifts his head and breath fogs the space between them. His eyes are dark and patient and carry a tiredness you do not find in younger animals. He steps out, sniffing her sleeve. The contact, wool to muzzle, rearranges the inside of her chest. She presses her fingers under his jaw and feels a tiny seismic shift. He had been found on the shoulder of a highway after the accident. Tangled in wire and splintered wood, a heap that should have been an end. The vet said he should have been dead. Instead, he watched the sky with a patience that said he was used to waiting. People called it a miracle. She called it complication. They do not speak. There is a conversation in small things. The angle of a head, softened eyes, the slow exhale that says you are not a threat. He leans his forehead into her palm like contraband solace. The gesture unsticks something under her ribs. That night is a series of small transactions. She ties a blanket loose across his back, checks an old cut, murmurs nonsense because human voices map heat. He tolerates the blanket. He tolerates the touch. He closes his eyes against distant traffic. She learns where a hand will smooth a flinch and how he prefers the rhythm of her breathing to the clang of a bucket. They invent a ritual. She will come at dusk, bring a carrot if she remembers, hum 3 low notes. He will not bolt when a truck rumbles. He will stand close enough that their shadows touch. It is not love at first sight. It is a mutual agreement to hold space. She studies him like a cartographer. There is a brand half hidden under hair, a scar, a sensitive spot along the flank. A farrier's tool sits nearby. Small markers point to a past she did not own. She keeps her hands neutral because the past in him is raw and not hers to open, without care. The envelope in her coat burns at the soft spot under her ribs. She imagines the photograph folding the world into pieces or making sense, and she resists explanation. She wants the horse to be an unmediated thing, not a museum of lost night compresses time. The stable is a place where clocks run humane. She counts the horse's breaths the way people in grief count minutes. In, out, in, out. The rhythm steadies a pulse she thought would never still. When she whispers a name she used to say aloud, he flinches like a bell in an empty room. He does not run. He watches with measuring attention that is not pity. There is a ridiculous tenderness. He sneezes and flings hay onto her boot. She laughs, surprised to hear herself. The laugh is a seam she can follow. For the first time in months, there is a sound that is not hollow. She notices small things that mean more than they should. How he turns to the east at dawn, how his nostrils flare when she rubs rosemary on her sleeve, the little click of his teeth when he takes a carrot. These details form a private lexicon. Once, when she left a racing medal on the hay rack because she did not trust her hands to hold it, he came to rest his head against the box, as if feeling for the weight that had once been placed there. In the mornings following, neighbors mention the rescue in passing, a polite kind of gossip, and she listens without speaking of the man. Sometimes she imagines the horse remembering bright barns and the thin, fast sound of starting gates. Other times, she imagines him remembering an argument, a hand that was not kind, or the jolt of a trailer that went too fast. When she brushes him, she finds a patch of dried blood under the tail, faint and stubborn. She does not ask whose it was. There are odd moments that feel like mistakes in the ledger of the world. He flinches at the scent of a leather glove, and for a second she thinks she hears the echo of tires. Once, at dusk, he lowers his head toward a rusted sign by the road and stares, as if listening to something beneath the wind. She stands on the other side of the fence and feels that something move in her, like an invisible hand closing a previously open wound. She keeps the photograph folded because she is not ready for facts that could turn tenderness into obligation. The photograph has the man's laugh in it, or at least she remembers the laugh as if from an old movie reel. Before she leaves, she goes back to the gate where moonlight slices thin. The photograph feels heavier now. She imagines opening it to find instructions, apologies, a cause, or a truth. She imagines opening it and finding nothing but another question. She does not open it. "Will you come if I leave?" she asks, and the question is nearly for herself. He snorts, a small puff that might be a laugh, and nudges her sleeve in an answer that is neither promise nor refusal, but something in between. He follows her to the gate in a slow, patient way, matching her stride as if they have been practicing. She walks home with a horse-shaped possibility behind her like a shadow that kept pace. The night seems less like an edge and more like something crossable. When she lies awake with the barn quiet in the distance, she fingers the photograph through, her coat as if to test whether it is real. Outside, a car breathes away on the lane and a dog answers in the distance. The horse's steady breathing in her memory steadies her. She does not know what patience will demand of either of them. She has made no promises but one. Tomorrow she will come back. Will he wait? The photograph stayed in her coat pocket for days, softening at the edges, carrying a weight that shifted depending on how she looked at it. Sometimes it felt like a shield, sometimes like a weapon. She couldn't bring herself to unfold it. Not yet. Instead, she kept to the barn. To the ritual. The horse waited as though he had always known her schedule. He would turn his head toward the door before her boots touched the straw, nostrils pulling at the scent of her arrival. There was no fanfare, just a quiet certainty that he recognized her in ways deeper than sight. She noticed the small things, first. The way his ears flicked when she said certain words, like he was listening for a voice that wasn't hers. The way he grew restless when the wind carried the smell of gasoline from the road. Once, when she hummed an old tune under her breath, a tune her brother used to whistle when he worked in the stables, the horse lifted his head and searched the air, eyes fixed on some invisible echo. It unsettled her. Because how could... grief makes you superstitious. It turns accidents into omens, gestures into messages. She told herself not to read into it, but every night when she left, the horse followed her to the gate. And every night, something in her chest ached, as though he was carrying part of the weight she refused to name. Weeks passed this way. She found herself speaking more often in the barn, her voice low and uneven. She told him things she hadn't told anyone, how quiet the house had become, how the mornings stretched like punishment, how she sometimes kept the kettle boiling just to feel less alone. He never moved away. When she spoke, he never judged. He only stood near enough that his breath warmed the cold between them, and then came the night she opened the photograph. It was raining, steady and relentless, the kind of rain that seeps into bones. She had gone to the barn anyway, coat heavy, on her shoulders. The horse shifted uneasily in the stall, rain tapping like fingers against the roof. She leaned against the gate, reached into her pocket, and unfolded the envelope. The photograph was simple. Faded at the edges, but clear enough. Her brother, grinning with his crooked teeth, one arm slung around the very same horse. They both looked younger, freer. The horse's coat shone like burnished copper, his mane plaited neatly as if ready for a show. On the back, in her brother's quick, uneven script, a single line. For when I can't say it myself, take care of him. Her throat closed. The barn blurred. She sank to her knees on the straw and pressed the photograph against her chest. All, the months of silence, all the unshed grief came rushing like a dam breaking. The tears were violent, spilling faster than she could catch. She shook with the force of it, gasping as if grief had fingers around her ribs. The horse stepped forward, slowly, carefully. He lowered his head until his muzzle brushed her shoulder. He stayed there, breathing slow and steady, anchoring her storm with the rhythm of his lungs. His warmth bled into her, quieting the panic, giving her something to lean against. She clutched the photograph until her knuckles went white. "I can't," she whispered, voice cracked. "I don't know how." The horse nudged her, firm but gentle, as if insisting that she was wrong. As if reminding her that survival wasn't something you decided. It was something you kept doing, breath after breath, step after step. She stayed on the ground until the sobs softened, until the photograph grew damp in her palm. The horse never moved. He stood guard, patient and immovable, until her breathing steadied again. From that night on, something shifted. She began to see him not as a burden or a mystery, but as a piece of her brother still alive. Not in a sentimental way, but in the way he carried habits and memories that belonged to the man she lost. When she spoke her brother's name, the horse no longer flinched. Instead, he turned his head, as if listening for a voice that wasn't there. The days grew lighter. She still carried grief, but it no longer hollowed her. She worked in the barn with steadier hands, brushing his coat until it shone, learning the rhythm of his walk beside her own. Neighbors noticed the change. They said her eyes looked less haunted. She didn't answer them. She didn't have to. Weeks became months. The horse grew calmer, less wary of sudden noises, less haunted by the shadows of traffic. Together they created new patterns. Long walks at dawn, quiet evenings by the fence, a silence that felt less like emptiness and more like presence. She caught herself laughing more often, not the brittle sound she used to make, but laughter that rose unbidden. One morning, as frost glazed the fields, the horse tugged her toward the far end of the pasture. She followed, curious. At the base of an old oak tree, half buried in earth, she found a small wooden box, weathered but intact. Her brother's handwriting carved into the lid. For her. Hands trembling, she opened it. Inside lay a collection of things he had kept, a worn leather bracelet she had given him when they were teenagers, a folded letter, and a ribbon from one of the horse's early races. She unfolded the letter with careful hands. His words were uneven, rushed but clear. "If you're reading this, I'm sorry. I hope the horse finds you when I can't. He's stubborn, but he listens. Take care of him, and let him take care of you." She pressed the paper to her lips, tears slipping silently. This time, they weren't the violent tears of loss, but the softer kind, the kind that healed as they fell. The horse lowered his head again, brushing her hand with his muzzle. She laughed through the tears, stroking the line of his jaw. "He always knew," she whispered. "Didn't he?" The barn became more than a refuge. It became a bridge. Between the past she had lost and the future she was still afraid to claim. The horse was not a miracle cure, not a fairy tale. He was simply steady. And in his steadiness, she learned to stand again. By spring, she could walk through the house without feeling its silence choke her. By summer, she could sit in the garden without needing the kettle to fill the space. And by autumn, she realized she had stopped carrying the photograph in her pocket. It wasn't because she had forgotten. It was because she didn't need proof anymore. She had him, and sometimes, late at night, she would stand at the gate, watch the horse grazing under the stars, and feel her brother's presence, not as a ghost, but as a quiet reassurance in the way the horse turned his head toward her, steady and sure. Sometimes healing doesn't come with answers. Sometimes it comes with company, with breath against your shoulder, with footsteps beside yours, with the steady reminder that you are not carrying it alone. Sometimes the ones who carry you are the ones no one else saw coming. If this story touched you, subscribe, leave a comment, and press the bell so you can be here for the next story that just might change your heart.